I always believed family meant unconditional support, especially through life's darkest moments. When my leukemia diagnosis came 3 years ago, I expected my parents and sister Vanessa to rally around me. Instead, they dismissed my symptoms, missed my treatments, and carried on with their lives as if nothing had changed. "It's probably just stress," my mother would say while my father buried himself in work. Vanessa, always the golden child, was too busy planning her perfect wedding to notice I was fighting for my life. I endured the chemo alone. I sat through endless nights of fever and pain without anyone to hold my hand. I memorized the ceiling tiles of my hospital room because no one was there to distract me with conversation. Dr. Reynolds became more family to me than my own blood relatives. Nurse Martinez knew more about my pain levels than my mother ever bothered to ask. While I was learning whether I would live or die, my family was learning to live without me in their carefully curated, picture-perfect existence. Then came Vanessa's diagnosis. The same cancer, the same hospital, the same doctors. Suddenly, my parents' calendar cleared. My mother took leave from work. My father set up a fundraiser. Family dinners were rescheduled around Vanessa's treatment plan. The same relatives who never once visited me were lined up outside her door with flowers and homemade meals. I watched from the shadows as they became the support system I had desperately needed but never received. Last week, I packed my bags. I left a single note. "You chose to ignore my leukemia. I choose to ignore hers." I deleted their numbers, changed my address, and disappeared from their lives as thoroughly as they had disappeared from mine when I needed them most. They say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes it's just as easy to wash away. My new life begins today without the weight of their selective love dragging me down. They made their choice 3 years ago. Now I've made mine. The diagnosis came during a routine checkup. I'd been feeling unusually tired for months, but I chalked it up to overworking myself at the office. "Just a complete blood count," my doctor had said, "standard procedure." Those words, standard procedure, how innocuous they seemed then. When the results came back, my world shattered. Leukemia. The word itself felt like a death sentence. My doctor explained the treatment options, the success rates, the side effects, but all I could think about was how I'd tell my family. Would they fall apart? Would they rally around me? Would they be my strength through this battle? I called my mother first. Her voice, usually warm and comforting, turned cold and distant when I told her the news. "Are you sure?" she asked. Not, "I'll be right there," or "We'll get through this together." Just doubt, disbelief, as if I might be making it up. "They ran the tests twice," I said, my voice breaking. "It's confirmed. I start treatment next week." "Well," she sighed after a long pause, "these things happen. Try not to stress so much. That probably made it worse in the first place." That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the wall, wondering if I'd somehow failed to communicate the gravity of my situation. Maybe she was in shock. Maybe she needed time to process. Maybe tomorrow would be different. It wasn't. My father was even worse. When I told him about my diagnosis, he nodded as if I'd just told him about a minor inconvenience at work. "You've always been strong," he said. "You'll pull through." Then he mentioned a business trip he couldn't reschedule. "Your mother will check in on you," he promised. She didn't. And Vanessa? My perfect sister who was planning her perfect wedding to her perfect fiancé. She sent flowers to my apartment with a card that read, "Get well soon. Hope you can still make it to the bridal shower next month." As if leukemia was a bad cold I'd shake off in a week. The first round of chemo was brutal. I threw up for days. My hair came out in clumps. My body felt like it was at war with itself, which I suppose it was. The hospital room was sterile and cold, the beeping of machines my only constant companion. I kept checking my phone, waiting for messages, calls, anything that would tell me my family cared. "No visitors today?" Nurse Martinez would ask each morning. "They're coming later," I'd lie, preserving what little dignity I had left. By the 3rd week of treatment, I stopped expecting them to show up. By the 2nd month, I stopped mentioning them to the hospital staff. By the 3rd month, I realised that in my family story, I was merely a supporting character, one they could write out when the plot became too inconvenient. Dr. Reynolds, my oncologist, became my surrogate family. He'd sit with me for a few extra minutes during his rounds, telling me about his children, his garden, his favourite books. Small talk, the kind families make, the kind mine never did. "Any family coming in today?" he'd ask gently. "They're busy," I'd reply. "Important things." He never questioned it, but the pity in his eyes told me he understood what I wasn't saying. 6 months into my treatment, I received an invitation to Vanessa's wedding. No phone call to check if I was well enough to attend. No note asking how I was doing. Just an engraved card with my name misspelled and a request for an RSVP. I dragged myself there, my body weak, my hair just starting to grow back in uneven patches. I wore a wig that itched incessantly and makeup that couldn't quite hide the hollowness in my cheeks. I smiled in family photos, standing at the edge where I could be easily cropped out if needed. "You look tired," my mother commented at the reception. Not, "How are you feeling?" or "I'm sorry I haven't visited." Just an observation about my appearance, as if my greatest failing was looking ill at my sister's perfect day. "Cancer does that," I replied, but she had already turned away, beckoning to a distant relative she hadn't seen in years. During the father-daughter dance, my dad held Vanessa like she was made of glass, precious and irreplaceable. I remembered how, when I was 7 and broke my arm, he'd told me to toughen up, that tears wouldn't fix anything. 2 different daughters, 2 different sets of rules. I left the wedding early, unnoticed. The taxi driver asked if I'd had a good time. "Family," I said, as if that explained everything. And in a way, it did. The treatments continued. Some days were better than others. Some days I could pretend that I was just a normal person living a normal life. Other days, the pain and nausea reminded me of the war raging in my blood. My colleagues sent cards. My neighbours brought meals. My college roommate flew in from across the country to spend a weekend with me. But my family? They sent occasional texts. "How's it going?" or "Thinking of you." As if checking a box on a to-do list. Remember daughter with cancer. Send obligatory message. One day, during a particularly rough patch, I called my mother in tears. The pain was unbearable, and for a moment I just wanted my mum. The way other people had their mums. The way I'd seen in movies and read in books. "Mom," I sobbed into the phone. "I don't think I can do this anymore." "Oh, honey," she said, and for a second, I thought she might finally understand. "I know it's hard, but this attitude won't help. Try to be positive. I have to go now. Your father and I are meeting the Hendersons for dinner. I'll call you tomorrow." She didn't call the next day, or the day after. I learned to survive without them. I built my own support system of friends, colleagues, and medical staff who showed more genuine concern than my blood relatives ever had. I celebrated small victories alone. Each good blood test, each day without vomiting, each milestone that meant I might actually survive this. And survive I did. Against the odds, my body responded to the treatment. The cancer went into remission. I should have been overjoyed, but instead, I felt a strange emptiness. I had fought the hardest battle of my life and won, but at what cost? I had lost any illusion about what family meant to me. When I called to tell them I was in remission, my father said, "That's great news! See, I told you you'd beat it." As if his absent confidence had somehow been the cure. My mother said, "We should celebrate. Why don't you come over for dinner next weekend?" As if a dinner could make up for the empty chair beside my hospital bed for all those months. Vanessa sent a text. "Awesome! So happy for you!" 3 exclamation points. To compensate for the 0 visits, I went to that dinner. I sat at the table and listened to them talk about their lives. My father's promotion, my mother's garden club, Vanessa's honeymoon. No one asked about my experience. No one wanted to hear about the darkness I had crawled through. It was as if my illness had been a minor subplot in their lives, now conveniently resolved so we could all move on. I smiled and nodded and played my part. But something had changed in me. I no longer craved their approval or their love. I no longer needed to belong in their picture-perfect family portrait. I had seen their true colours, and they were far from the warm, supportive hues I had always imagined. As I drove home that night, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I didn't need them. I had survived without them. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. Little did I know that life had a twisted sense of irony waiting just around the corner. It was a Tuesday morning when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I'd been setting boundaries with my family, limiting our interactions to occasional texts and obligatory holiday gatherings. But something made me pick up. "Hello?" My voice was cautious. "Lily?" It was my father, and something in his tone made my stomach tighten. He never called me. Never. "What's wrong?" I asked, already knowing that whatever came next would change everything. "It's Vanessa." His voice cracked, and in that moment, I felt a chill run through me. "She has leukemia, the same type you had." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. For a moment, I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The same cancer, the same battle. But I knew, without being told, that her journey would be nothing like mine. "When?" I managed to ask. "Diagnosed yesterday. We're at Memorial Hospital now. The doctors are starting treatment immediately." The same hospital where I had spent countless days alone. The same doctors who had known me by name, who had witnessed my solitary struggle. "I see," I said, because what else could I say? "We need you," my father continued, and the irony of those 3 words wasn't lost on me. "You've been through this. You know what to expect. You can help her. Help her, be there for her, guide her through the nightmare I had navigated alone." The request hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken expectations. "I'll come by later," I promised, not sure if I meant it. But I did go. Something pulled me there. Curiosity, perhaps, or a masochistic desire to witness firsthand the disparity in how our identical illnesses would be treated. The scene that greeted me at the hospital was exactly as I had imagined. My mother, who had visited me perhaps 3 times during my entire treatment, was already setting up camp in Vanessa's room. She had brought blankets from home, soft, plush throws to replace the thin hospital bedding, a photo frame with Vanessa's wedding picture, fresh flowers that filled the sterile room with colour and life. My father was speaking with Dr. Reynolds, the same doctor who had treated me. They were deep in conversation, my father asking detailed questions about treatment options, success rates, clinical trials. Questions he had never bothered to ask when it was my life hanging in the balance. And Vanessa, perfect Vanessa, lay in the hospital bed looking scared and small, surrounded by more love and support than I had seen in my entire battle with the disease. "Lily." She noticed me hovering in the doorway. "You came?" I nodded, stepping into the room that felt like a bizarre mirror image of my own experience. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," she admitted, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't know if I can do this." I wanted to tell her that she could, that she would, that unlike me, she wouldn't have to do it alone. But the words stuck in my throat. "Lily has been through this," my mother said, stroking Vanessa's hair. "She can tell you it's not so bad." As if my experience had been a minor inconvenience, a brief detour on the road of life rather than the hellish journey it had been. "Not so bad," I repeated, struggling to keep my voice even. "Is that what you think?" My mother looked at me, confused by my tone. Well, you got through it. You're fine now. Fine. Such a small, inadequate word for what I had endured and overcome, alone. I need some air, I said, turning to leave. I couldn't bear to stay in that room, watching the dramatic display of familial love and support that had been conspicuously absent during my own illness. In the hallway, I ran into Nurse Martinez. She recognized me immediately, her face lighting up. "Lily, how are you? Still in remission, I hope?" "Yes," I said, grateful for her genuine concern. "I'm here for my sister. She was just diagnosed." Nurse Martinez's smile faltered. "I heard. Same type, right? That's unusual in siblings." She touched my arm gently. "Are you okay? This must be triggering for you." More concern in that one question than my family had shown in months of my illness. "I'm processing," I admitted. "Well, if you need to talk, you know where to find me." She gave my arm a squeeze before continuing on her rounds. Over the next few weeks, I watched from the periphery as my family transformed into the support system I had desperately needed but never received. My mother took a leave of absence from her job to be with Vanessa every day. My father rearranged his work schedule, delegating responsibilities so he could be present for important appointments. They created a meal train, a visitation schedule, a fundraiser to help with medical costs. Friends and relatives who had never once asked about my condition during my treatment were suddenly cancer experts, offering advice and support and endless amounts of compassion. The same aunt who had forgotten to call me on my birthday during chemo was now bringing homemade soup to the hospital daily. I watched it all with a detached fascination, as if observing a play where actors portrayed the roles of caring family members with convincing sincerity. I kept waiting for someone, anyone, to acknowledge the stark contrast between their response to Vanessa's illness and their neglect during mine. But that acknowledgement never came. Instead, I was expected to join their performance, to take on the role of the supportive sister who had been there and could offer wisdom and guidance. I was expected to set aside my own unresolved trauma to comfort Vanessa through the very experience that had broken me. "Tell her about your experience with the nausea," my mother urged during one of my visits. "What helped you get through it?" What helped me? Nurse Martinez sneaking me extra anti-nausea meds. Dr. Reynolds sitting with me during his lunch break. The hospital janitor who would stop by with peppermint candies because he noticed no one else ever brought me anything. But not my family. Never my family. "Time," I said simply. "It passes eventually." My mother frowned, unsatisfied with my response. "You're not being very helpful, Lily. Your sister needs encouragement right now." I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. What I needed, apparently, had never been a consideration. As Vanessa's treatment progressed, the difference in our experiences became even more pronounced. When she lost her hair, my mother organised a head shaving party where close friends and family shaved their heads in solidarity. When I lost my hair, I had cut it off myself in my bathroom, sobbing alone as the strands fell into the sink. When Vanessa struggled with fatigue, my father hired a housekeeper to maintain her home and a meal delivery service to ensure she ate well. When I battled the same exhaustion, I had dragged myself to the grocery store on good days, stocking up on frozen meals I could heat up when standing became too difficult. When Vanessa faced a particularly challenging round of chemo, my parents created a video compilation of messages from friends and family to lift her spirits. When I had lain in that same hospital bed fighting the same battle, my phone had remained silent except for work emails asking when I might return. The injustice of it all burned inside me, a flame that grew hotter with each passing day. I tried to extinguish it, to remind myself that Vanessa's suffering was real regardless of how much support she received. That cancer was an enemy no one deserved to face, even with an army behind them. But still, the question persisted. Why her and not me? What made her worthy of such devotion while I had been deemed strong enough to suffer alone? One evening, after a particularly difficult day, watching my parents fuss over Vanessa's every need, I found myself alone with my father in the hospital cafeteria. He looked exhausted, the strain of Vanessa's illness clearly taking its toll. "You look tired," I said, echoing the only concern my mother had ever shown me during my treatment. He nodded, rubbing his face with his hands. "I don't know how people do this. The constant worry, the helplessness. It's unbearable." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "How people do this?" I repeated. "You mean how I did this? Alone?" He looked up, confusion crossing his features. "That was different," he said dismissively. "How was it different?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Same cancer, same hospital, same treatment. What exactly was different, Dad?" He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "You were always so independent, Lily. So strong. You didn't need us hovering over you." "I didn't need you." The laugh that escaped me was bitter and hollow. "I called Mum, crying in pain. I texted you from chemo appointments. I asked repeatedly for someone to stay with me after particularly rough treatments. How was that not needing you?" "You managed fine," he insisted, as if my survival somehow justified their absence. "I survived," I corrected him. "There's a difference." He didn't respond, his gaze fixed on his coffee cup as if it held the answers to questions he'd never bothered to ask. "Do you know who held my hand during my first chemo session?" I continued, unable to stop now that the dam had broken. "Nurse Martinez. Do you know who brought me ginger ale when I couldn't keep anything down?" "Dr. Reynolds. Do you know who checked on me when I developed a fever in the middle of the night? The night shift nurse whose name I never even learned. Not my mother, not my father, not my sister. Strangers showed me more compassion than my own family." My father's face had grown pale, but whether from shock at my words or anger at my audacity to speak them, I couldn't tell. "And now," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "now you're here every day. You're organising fundraisers and support groups and head-shaving parties. You're taking time off work and hiring help and being the parents I needed but never had. And no one, not one person in this family, has acknowledged how differently you're treating Vanessa's illness compared to mine." My father's silence spoke volumes. He opened his mouth as if to respond, then closed it again, his eyes darting around the cafeteria as though searching for an escape route. Finally, he sighed deeply. "We didn't handle your illness well," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I know that now. Too little, too late." Those words hovered unspoken between us. "But that doesn't mean we should fail Vanessa too," he continued, his tone hardening. "Two wrongs don't make a right, Lily." I stared at him incredulous. "Is that what you think this is about? That I want you to neglect Vanessa the way you neglected me? That I want her to suffer alone like I did?" He didn't answer, but his expression told me everything. In his mind, my pointing out their differential treatment was equivalent to asking them to abandon Vanessa in her time of need, as if there was no middle ground between their complete absence during my illness and their overwhelming presence during hers. "I'm glad Vanessa has support," I said quietly, standing up from the table. "No one should face cancer alone. I just wish someone in this family had thought I deserved the same." I walked away, my heart heavy with the realization that they would never truly understand the depth of their betrayal, that in their minds they had done nothing wrong, or, if they had, it was a minor oversight easily dismissed in the face of current challenges. The following days were a blur of hospital visits, awkward interactions with my family, and increasingly frequent panic attacks when I was alone. Every beeping monitor, every antiseptic smell, every glimpse of an IV stand catapulted me back to my own treatment, to the loneliness, the fear, the abandonment, I tried to be there for Vanessa, I really did. But each time I entered her hospital room, to find it filled with flowers and cards and visitors, each time I witnessed my mother tenderly stroking her hair, or my father intently discussing treatment options with her doctors, the wound inside me reopened. One afternoon, I arrived to find my mother reading aloud to Vanessa while she rested. It was such a simple act of care, yet it broke something in me. No one had ever read to me during those long, painful days when even watching TV had been too taxing. "I need to go," I said abruptly, turning to leave. "But you just got here," my mother protested. "Vanessa was hoping you'd stay for a while. Tell her about how you handled the mouth sores from chemo." I stood frozen in the doorway, my back to them, unable to face another moment of this performance. "Lily?" Vanessa called weakly from her bed. "Are you okay?" The concern in her voice was genuine, I knew that. Vanessa wasn't to blame for our parents' favouritism. She hadn't asked to be the golden child any more than I had asked to be the forgotten one. But in that moment, I couldn't separate her from the pain she represented. "No," I said finally, turning to face them. "I'm not okay. I haven't been okay for a long time." My mother's brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about? You're in remission. The doctor said you're doing well." "Physically, yes," I agreed. "But every time I walk into this room and see how differently you're treating Vanessa's illness compared to mine, it feels like going through cancer all over again. Except this time, the pain is knowing how capable you were of being there. You just chose not to be there for me." My mother's face paled. "That's not fair, Lily. We did our best." "Your best?" I echoed, disbelief colouring my tone. "Your best was a text message once a week asking how I was doing. Your best was missing my most critical appointments. Your best was telling me to stay positive when I called you crying in pain." "We didn't know what to do," my mother defended weakly. "You knew exactly what to do," I countered, gesturing around the room. "You're doing it now. For her." From her hospital bed, Vanessa watched our exchange with growing horror. "Lily," she whispered, "I had no idea." And that was the truth of it. Vanessa, wrapped in the cocoon of our parents' devotion, had never witnessed their neglect of me. She had taken their love and attention as her due, never questioning why the same wasn't extended to her sister. "It doesn't matter now," I said, suddenly exhausted. "I just wanted someone to acknowledge it, to see the difference, to understand why this is so hard for me." My mother stood up, her face a mask of indignation. "So what do you want from us, Lily? An apology? Would that make you happy? Fine, I'm sorry we couldn't drop everything the way we have for Vanessa. I'm sorry we didn't react perfectly. We're only human." Only human. The excuse that absolved them of responsibility while denying me the right to my pain. "What I wanted," I said quietly, "was my mother to hold my hand during chemo. What I wanted was my father to ask the doctors questions about my care. What I wanted was my sister to check on me occasionally instead of being annoyed that my illness might interfere with her wedding plans. What I wanted was to not have to face the scariest experience of my life alone." The room fell silent. Even the beeping of the monitors seemed muted, as if the machinery itself was holding its breath. "But it's too late for what I wanted then," I continued. Now, I just want to be free of this, of you, of the constant reminder of how little I mattered when I needed you most." I turned to leave, but my mother's voice stopped me. "You can't just walk away from your family, Lily, especially not now, when Vanessa needs you." I looked back at her, a sad smile on my face. "That's the difference between us, Mum. When I needed you, you had no problem walking away, repeatedly." That night, in the quiet of my apartment, I made a decision that had been forming in my mind for weeks. I couldn't continue this way, trapped in the cycle of witnessing their devotion to Vanessa while nursing my own unhealed wounds. I needed a clean break. I packed my bags methodically, taking only what I needed. Clothes, personal documents, a few cherished possessions. Everything else could be replaced. Everything except the time and energy I had wasted hoping for a family that had never really existed. I wrote a simple note. You chose to ignore my leukemia. I choose to ignore hers. Cruel, perhaps, but honest in a way our family had never been. With trembling hands, I deleted their numbers from my phone, changed my email address, called my landlord to terminate my lease. In the digital age, disappearing completely was nearly impossible, but I could come close enough. The relief I felt as I drove away from my old life was immediate and overwhelming, like a weight lifting from my chest, allowing me to breathe fully for the first time in years. I had survived cancer. I could survive this too, this severing of toxic ties, this rebirth into a life defined by my choices rather than their neglect. I found a new apartment in a different city, a new job that challenged and fulfilled me. New friends who knew nothing of my past, who accepted me for who I was now rather than who my family had trained me to be. Some nights I still woke up in a cold sweat, the phantom pain of illness ghosting through my body. On those nights, I reminded myself that I had defeated not just cancer, but the legacy of conditional love that had shaped my childhood. I had freed myself from the perpetual hope that someday, somehow, my family would see me, really see me, and find me worthy of the same love they so freely gave to Vanessa. 6 months after I left, a letter arrived at my new address. I stared at the envelope, recognizing my mother's handwriting with a sense of dread. How had she found me? And more importantly, why couldn't she respect my decision to remove myself from their lives? For days, the letter sat unopened on my kitchen counter, a tangible reminder of the past I was trying to leave behind. Finally, curiosity won out over caution, and I tore open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in my mother's neat script. Lily, Vanessa passed away last week. The cancer spread faster than anyone anticipated. In her final days, she asked for you constantly. She wanted to apologize, though she wasn't entirely sure what for. I think, in the end, she understood what you had been trying to tell us. Your father and I have had a lot of time to reflect on what you said that day in the hospital. You were right. We failed you when you needed us most, and no amount of care for Vanessa could ever make up for that. The truth is, we didn't know how to handle your illness. It terrified us, and in our fear, we retreated. With Vanessa, we were determined not to make the same mistake. But in doing so, we only highlighted our previous failure. We don't expect your forgiveness. We don't even expect a response to this letter. But we wanted you to know about Vanessa and to tell you that we understand now. Too late, perhaps, but we understand. Mum. I read the letter 3 times, searching for the emotional manipulation, the guilt trip, the demand for my return. But there was none. Just a simple acknowledgement of what I had always known, and they had always denied. They had failed me. Vanessa was gone. My sister, the golden child, had lost her battle with the same disease I had somehow survived. I waited for satisfaction, for the vindication I had imagined during my darkest moments of resentment. Instead, I felt only a profound sadness. Not just for Vanessa, whose life had been cut short, but for all of us. For the family we could have been if love had been distributed equally, if support had been given freely, if my illness had been treated with the same urgency and compassion as hers. I didn't attend the funeral. I didn't call my parents. I didn't respond to the letter. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt, and perhaps shouldn't be. The family that had shaped my childhood and abandoned me in my greatest need was now firmly in my past, where it belonged. Instead, I planted a small tree in the park near my new home. Not as a memorial for Vanessa specifically, but as a recognition of all that had been lost, not just to cancer, but to the insidious disease of conditional love that had infected our family long before any malignant cells had appeared in our bodies. As I watched the young sapling sway in the breeze, I made a promise to myself. If I ever had children of my own, they would never question their place in my heart. They would never lie alone in a hospital room, wondering why their pain mattered less than someone else's. They would never have to earn my presence, my concern, my devotion. They say that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water. But sometimes the family we're born into isn't capable of giving us what we need. Sometimes the thickness of blood becomes a suffocating presence rather than a nurturing bond. And sometimes walking away is the greatest act of self-love we can offer ourselves. My new life continues to unfold, day by day, free from the shadow of their selective love. I am healing, not just from cancer, but from the deeper wounds that no medical treatment could touch. I am learning that family can be chosen, that love can be unconditional, that support can be given without hesitation or measurement. They made their choice 3 years ago. I made mine 6 months ago, and despite the occasional pang of what might have been, I have never once regretted my decision to leave. Some diseases can only be cured by complete excision. Cancer taught me that, and sometimes the most aggressive treatment is the only way to ensure survival. They chose to ignore my leukemia. I chose to ignore hers. But in the end, I chose something far more important. I chose myself, my health, my peace, my chance at a life unburdened by the weight of their selective love. And that, perhaps, is the greatest remission of all.